Catholics in our region and around the world are mourning the death of Pope Francis. He was the first Latin American pontiff who died at the age of 88 on Easter Monday after 12 years as head of the Catholic Church. His funeral will take place on Saturday at St. Peter's Basilica in the Vatican. Joining us now is Dr. David Deane, Associate Professor of Theology at the Atlantic School of Theology. Good morning, David.
Good morning, Crystal.
So we know that about a month ago, the Pope left hospital after a 5-week stay recovering from double pneumonia. He appeared for Mass on Easter Sunday. How much of a shock was his death?
It was a shock because, we thought that he had gotten out of danger after his double pneumonia. And so it was quite a shock. Having said that, he did look extremely frail on Easter Sunday with his meeting with very brief meeting with J.D. Vance and with his time at St. Peter's. So it still came a little bit of a shock for sure.
Definitely. And the world is just coming to terms with the loss now. How is Pope Francis being remembered?
Well, he was tremendously well loved. He was loved outside of the church as a pope of remarkable compassion, remarkable care for those on the margins. His papal writings, his encyclicals covered things like the environment. And so his compassion has meant that people have just revered him all across the world.
Now, his funeral is on Saturday. Can you explain a bit more about the rituals of mourning after the loss of a pope?
Well, normally it happens in a very formalized sense that there's a viewing of his body, which will probably start on Wednesday, and that he will be, processed around St. Peter's Square, and to give the people a chance to, to mourn and to pay their last respects. Having said that, Pope Francis was a renegade, and so he left strict instructions for his own funeral with Cardinal Farrell, who has this particular role of overseeing the funeral arrangements, and it's not certain that he will follow those protocols. He is the maverick right to the end and after.
So here's Cardinal Farrell announcing the death in this bit of visual here. So Farrell, how much? I guess I imagine that the Pope would have sat down and had a succession plan with the people who would carry it out. But I wonder does Farrell, could he kind of put the pomp in anyway, even though the Pope would recommend that it's not there? Because I think the world maybe demands a little bit of pomp when the death of someone so significant is happening.
Yeah, the world does, but Farrell would have received, only after the death of Pope Francis, he would have received written instructions from Pope Francis that he will be required to follow to the absolute letter. And so there will be a tension between, on the one hand, Pope Francis' desire to let the people mourn as they wish and to give the people their chance for a last farewell, and then his own tremendous humility in eschewing of pomp. But that will have been sealed in a last bequest that he would have left, and Cardinal Farrell, who has a very minor role, but this is an important role, but it's a very small role, will have to follow that to the absolute T.
Interesting. All right. Now, I understand that Cardinal Farrell is in charge of the plan and the process of selecting the successor to the Pope. So, in terms of leadership of the Church, what happens next?
Well, Farrell simply has to just oversee the protocols. And so straight away last night, there was a call which went out to cardinals from all over the world to gather for a series of meetings. And so it's extremely formalized. So today, I think they'll have their first meeting, which is extremely quickly. That won't give a chance for many cardinals from various parts of the world to get there. So the meetings will actually start prior to some cardinals getting there. This has actually raised questions. Why is it so fast? And are they trying to keep certain cardinals from arriving in time for the earliest meetings? Then there are a particular number of cardinals who will give speeches on what's required. Interestingly, Pope Francis was one of those cardinals last time. That was part of his role. And so they'll start a series of prayer and meetings and gatherings, and then probably in 15 to 20 days they will gather in the Sistine Chapel, all the cardinal electors, and they will start the voting process, and they will go through rounds of voting looking to establish a 2/3 majority.
All right, so any front runners in the, it's a double-barreled question, any front runners in the Pope candidacy, or is there a chance a Canadian could become Pope?
Two fascinating questions. There's an old expression that he who enters the conclave a pope leaves a cardinal, which basically means that favorites tend not to do so well. I don't think there has been a favorite who's been elected. It's usually an outsider. And so you will see names like Cardinal Tagle from the Philippines, who very much is the kind of like the Asian Pope Francis, that he would be a front runner. Cardinal Parolin, who's the Secretary of State, that is the chief Vatican bureaucrat. The Secretary of State is always one of the favorites. But again, it's impossible to really, with any confidence, say who the front runner is. As regards a Canadian option, there is actually a possibility, a curious possibility, in that what often will happen in these things is that conservatives will have their favorite, liberals will have their favorite, but it's often very difficult to get a two-thirds majority from either bloc. And sometimes what happens is that a third candidate who is completely off people's radar can be elected as a compromise. And so someone like Cardinal Ouellette, who was in the running last time, might be seen as a short-term. He's quite old. He's 80. A short-term compromise candidate, which would have sort of kicked down the road some of the bigger challenges facing the church. And so there is an extremely outside, but nonetheless a possibility of Cardinal Ouellette from Canada being elected Pope.
Well, very interesting that you paint that picture of the two sides, the progressive side that Pope Francis led and pushed papacy, to limits it's never seen, and then as a result, conservatives are not happy about that. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens. But maybe yes, everybody will have that second choice that they can agree on. It is going to be fascinating the coming days. Anything else you want to say before we go, David?
No, simply how you summed that up was really, really good. What we will see will be a referendum on the future of the church. And so this is one of the most fascinating papal conclaves for centuries.
Yeah, for sure. All right, David, maybe we'll have you back as the process unfolds to get a little bit more insight into it. We appreciate your time this morning. Thank you.
For sure. Thank you, Crystal. I appreciate that.
And that was David Deane joining us from the Atlantic School of Theology. CTV Morning Live will take a brief break and be back in about 2 minutes' time.